Village up ahead, Barrack reported, leaning over with his hands on his legs as he struggled to catch his breath. Dried blood still coated his side beneath the rough bandages they'd rigged for him after Kargath Bladefist had ordered the Shattered Hand clan to abandon Hellfire Citadel. Yet Barrack was actually one of the least injured among their little band, which was why they were here. "I'll go on by myself," Kargath told Barrack and the others. "I will make better time." He glanced around at the other orcs. "Heal quickly. When I return, we'll set out for the Black Temple." As he walked, Kargath wondered how it had come to this. True, when Ner'zhul had given him those orders to stay behind and delay the alliance at Hellfire Citadel, it had been obvious the shaman did not expect them to survive. Nor was death in battle a problem for Kargath or any of his Shattered Hand orcs. But dying with honor was one thing, dying for no reason was another, and leaving Ner'zhul and the others defenseless against the alliance would bring dishonor on them and their entire clan, even if they had died in the process. That was why when he had seen that the alliance had conquered the citadel and shattered all their defenses, Kargath had gathered what warriors he could find and had set out for the Black Temple itself. But he'd had fewer than he'd hoped, and many of them had been so badly wounded they hadn't even survived the first night. Now he had only a handful left, none of them uninjured. He stalked on, a part of him noting the landscape around him. Most of Draenor resembled Hellfire Peninsula, with its cracked red ground and bare stretches. Why then was this region still so green? Lush grass cushioned its steps, and clumps of bushes alternated with tall trees. Nagrand had clearly not been touched by the same desolation as the rest of their world. But why? It was ironic in a way, the greenest, healthiest part of Draenor, and it was home to sick and weakened orcs. As he crested a low hill, Kargath saw the village spread out before him. Its tightly built walls, domed roofs, and plank porches were in the same style as most orc villages, including his own. For a second, Kargath entertained the notion of bringing his warriors here, chasing out the current inhabitants and claiming the village as their own. They could not let the war pass them by. Ner'zhul did not expect to see any of them again, so he wouldn't be surprised when they never appeared. They could let the horde go on to the other worlds and live out their days instead, tending herds and crops and battling whatever beast lives in the forest whenever they felt the old bloodlust rise. But no, Kargath scolded himself. He had sworn an oath to fight for the horde. How could he live with himself, or look any of his warriors in the eye, if he did not give them his all? Besides, he thought with a shiver, claiming this village would mean facing its current residents, and he didn't think any of his warriors were up for that. Walking down the hill, Kargath approached the village cautiously. He saw a few orcs moving around sluggishly, patches of brown against the green of their surroundings, but they hadn't noticed him yet. When he was still 100 feet or so from the nearest hut, Kargath slowed to a halt. "Gaia!" he shouted, breaking into a short spate of coughing as the deep breath exacerbated his injuries. "Great Mother Gaia!" The orcs he'd noticed earlier looked up, startled, then disappeared into the nearest huts. Hopefully they were summoning Gaia, Kargath thought bitterly. He doubted he had the strength for another shout right now. A moment later, the curtains over a hut entrance rustled and then were pushed aside. Great Mother Gaia emerged and stomped toward him, squinting against the sunlight. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice as sharp as ever. "Kargath Bladefist, chieftain of the Shattered Hand clan," he replied, forcing himself to stand up straight as she approached. "Kargath, eh? I've not seen you for many a year," Gaia commented. She finally stopped halfway between him and the huts and met his gaze. Her eyes were still violet, Kargath noted, and her long hair was still thick, if streaked with gray. She didn't look ill. Impatient, though, and the curl of her lip. Was that revulsion he saw there? "What do you want here?" she demanded, confirming his impression. "An Alliance army has invaded Draenor," Kargath told her, his sense of urgency warring with the respectfulness his elders had drummed into him as a youth. "They've overthrown Hellfire Citadel and will be marching on the Black Temple soon." "Eh? And what's that to me?" Gaia asked, sniffing. "Monuments to war. The both of those places. We're better off with them gone." "I need warriors," Kargath explained, hoping he sounded confident and demanding rather than desperate. "Any orc able to fight must come with me at once." Gaia stared at him, her eyes wide. "Are you mad?" she burst out. "This is a village of the sick. Or have you forgotten that?" She studied him, and a sly grin flickered across her lips. "No, I can see you haven't. Or would you rather we continue this discussion inside one of the huts?" When he shifted uneasily from foot to foot, her grin widened. "As I thought. You know who dwells here." Her grin turned to a scowl. "And now you want to add to their suffering by dragging them into your foolish war. Why should they fight? Why should any of us?" She glared at him. "You invaded the humans' world. Think of this as a consequence." Kargath felt his own lips pulling back in a snarl as his anger began to outweigh his fear. "We are all part of the Horde," he reminded her sharply. "We are one race, and all must survive or fall together." He studied her for a second, then switched to a different tack. "Ner'zhul says he can get us off this hellhole. If he can get to the Black Temple and hold off the Alliance long enough, he can open portals to other worlds. You could have an entire world to yourself, for you and your patients." "What's wrong with this world?" Gaia responded. She gestured at the greenery all around them. "I like it just fine. This world is dying." "Only part of it," she countered. "The part you and your full warlocks have tainted." "Nargrand is as vibrant as ever." She looked smug. "It is Maghar, uncorrupted, and so are its people. They may be sick with red pox, even dying from it, but at least their pocked skin is brown, and they have not been fooled by the Horde's dark magics." "It is your duty," Kargath insisted. "All your warriors must come with me at once." Gaia laughed at him then. "You want them?" she asked. "Get them yourself. Drag them out of their sick beds, and you can take them with you to your war." Kargath glared at her, but his anger was up now, and overwhelming all else, including his fear. "They don't look that ill," he said, staring past her to where many of the orcs she tended had emerged from various huts to watch the exchange. From here he could see that some of them were limping, and others were bent or bowed or hunched, but they all appeared to have the right number of limbs, and at this point, as long as they could hold a club, he'd take them. He started toward the village, just as one of the figures stepped away from its hut and approached them. It was a male, a young warrior, and as he neared, Kargath could see he was tall and muscular. He was also staggering, swaying on his feet, and his brown skin was pale, except where angry red pustules marred it, many of them seeping a thin red fluid that looked more like tainted tears than blood. With a start, Kargath realized he knew the youth. It was Garrosh Hellscream, son of Grom. "What has happened?" Garrosh demanded, lurching to stop beside Gaia. "Why are you here? Is it the Horde?" A strange look came over the youth's face. "Is it my—" A horrible wet groan rose from his throat, drowning out his words. And then Garrosh fell to his knees, gasping as blood and bile spilled from his mouth, pouring down his chin and chest and soaking into the grass below. "I warned you not to exert yourself," Gaia snapped, steadying him with a hand on his shoulder. She did not seem concerned about the risk of touching him. The pox is still upon you, and you're nowhere near well enough to leave your hut yet. She glared at Kargath, a nasty smile on her face. Do you want him to join you for battle? All these warriors you'd hoped you'd find? Kargath had recoiled when Garrosh started spitting up blood, and he continued to back away now. No, they are no warriors. Disgust and despair added venom to his words. They are not even orcs anymore. They are useless. He glared at Gaia and Garrosh, and at the other villagers behind them. You pathetic weaklings, he snarled, raising his voice as best he could. Do the Horde a favor and die here. If you can't help defend your people, you have no right to live. With that, he turned on his heels and stalked off. There was nothing for it now but to take his remaining warriors and disappear into the hills. He lacked the numbers to make a difference at the Black Temple. 2, the more he thought about it. After being abandoned at Hellfire Citadel, Kargath felt he did not owe Ner'zhul anything anyway. No, he would take what few soldiers he had left and find some place to hole up and rebuild. Someday they would be strong again, and then they would reclaim Hellfire Citadel and the rest of the land from there. And when he finally did die, Kargath vowed it would be on his feet. He shuddered at what lay behind him. No matter what, he would not end up like them. We need to get you back to your bed, Gaia scolded Garrosh, though more gently now. Garrosh shook off her hands. What did he say? He demanded in a hoarse whisper, his throat still spasming after tossing out so much liquid. Was it about my father? Is he still alive? Gaia looked away, unable to meet the hope flickering in the boy's eyes. Was Grom alive? She had no idea. Not that it mattered. She had heard plenty about the older Hellscream over the past few years, about his savagery and his battle frenzy and his appetite for violence. He had been the first to give himself to the Horde, and to Gul'dan's full, foul magic. She knew, and it had corrupted him utterly. Even if he still lived, he would surely be beyond redemption. He didn't say anything about your father, she told Garrosh now, gripping his arm again and refusing to be put off a second time. I'm sure he is still alive and well, else Kargath would have mentioned it. Garrosh nodded and let himself be led away, his energy spent. Gaia's heart went out to him, and all the orcs she tended to hear. Would they survive the Red Pox? Some of them, perhaps, but not all. Yet a part of her couldn't help feeling that at least their deaths would be cleaner than those of the orcs whose souls had been so tainted. The marks showed through to their veiny skin. She shook her head and continued walking with Garrosh, refusing to glance back to where the emerald-skinned Kargath was still marching away.